I was very excited about finally watching The Sunmakers, as it's one of the few Doctor Who stories that I've never seen before. That hasn't happened since The Mutants. I did read the novelisation as a kid, but I don't remember much about it. As it turns out, it's not really a kid-friendly story. There's no monsters or aliens, really, and the humour is mostly aimed at adults. I can certainly appreciate it now, but I would probably have hated it had I watched it at a younger age. This is the first Doctor Who story in quite some time. That's been set in a brutal dystopian world, where the Doctor has to encourage the populace to rise up in rebellion. I guess this sort of story is more common in the 6th or 7th Doctor era, but the 4th Doctor is certainly enough of an anarchist that it does feel appropriate to see him leading a revolution. In fact, this is probably the best TARDIS team you could get for such a story, as Leela is very keen to start fighting the oppressors, and K9 comes in very useful as well. Obviously, this was intended as a satire of the income tax system in the 1970s. This is probably the most blatantly satirical story Robert Holmes has written since Carnival of Monsters, and many scenes in it are clearly written and played as pure comedy. It's been 40 odd years since it first aired, but yeah, most of the humour still works fine. Taxes are a constant after all, and pretty much everyone has had to deal with this sort of complicated government bureaucracy at one point or another. Visually, the story looks incredibly cheap, with lots of bare empty corridors and rooms with black sheets instead of walls. You can really see the budget cuts starting to bite. The show's starting to look very much like I remember it being in the late 70s and 80s. There is some location filming, but it's just more long, empty corridors and a barren rooftop. It's absolutely appropriate to the fictional location, and it definitely helps to make it convincing as an absolute hellhole, but it doesn't make the show any easier to watch. The actors are clearly enjoying themselves, at least. Michael Keating is clearly enjoying playing a rebel, and he would go on to play another rebel in Blake 7. Only his character in that show is a lot less confident than he is here. The performance of the two main villains could only be described as extraordinary. Richard Leach gives a very fruity, theatrical turn as Gatherer Haid, with a wonderfully elaborate costume and a memorable performance. He seems to be the main villain at first, but then Richard Leach shows up as the Collector, who's like a Bond villain turned up to 11. His nasal, whiny performance is so over the top, it comes right down the other side and back round again. It's probably more appropriate for a kids' show, really, but it's so entertaining, you can't really complain. Both these actors have a great double act together, and their confrontations with the Doctor are also highly memorable. Neither are remotely scary, but they are very funny to make up for it. The DVD has a 25-minute making-of documentary. Louise Jameson enthuses about it being her favourite story. There's an astronomer giving background on Pluto, and we also get some background on the political situation of the time, which is actually quite useful. There's also an 18-minute feature about composer Dudley Simpson, which they went all the way to Sydney to film. Nice work if you can get it. Overall, it looks terrible, but the writing and performances do help to lift it above average. But they can only go so far, so I'll give it a 6. Next week, it's Underworld. I'm pretty sure I've never seen that one either, but I do own the DVDs, so I may have watched it and wiped it from my memory. It does have quite a bad reputation, but I'll try to keep an open mind. So subscribe if you don't want to miss out on that, or indeed my reviews of these 3 new episodes which have come in these following weeks. See you next time.